You look at the marble columns of the American Republic and assume the structure is secure because the exterior still gleams. But the facade is a distraction. The load-bearing core of the executive branch has been methodically hollowed out. Treating this decay as a story about one man's appetites lets the more frightening reality slide past you. Donald Trump acts as the agent, but the vulnerability remains built into the system itself. The constitutional framework drawn up in 1787 was built on several assumptions that nobody bothered to write down. The first was a reliance on character. The designers built a system for landed gentlemen who could be shamed out of office by a well-aimed newspaper editorial. They assumed a corrupt official would eventually feel embarrassment. This diagram highlights a second expired assumption. The founders assumed the federal government would remain the dominant economic actor in the nation. Today, a handful of technology companies are worth nearly 3 times the size of the entire federal budget. The scale and speed of 21st century capital overwhelms an 18th century regulatory framework. When you run a modern, highly capitalized operation headlong into that antiquated framework, the executive powers get repurposed. To understand how, we have to map exactly how legal rulings, economic asymmetry, and information saturation were engineered into a single machine. Because the foundational assumptions of 1787 have expired, the founding documents alone no longer possess the mechanical strength to stop it. We start with the architecture of the executive branch. The Constitution handed the president 3 specific powers on the understanding that an executive couldn't function without them: the pardon, immunity from nuisance lawsuits, and control over federal prosecutions. Take the pardon. James Madison envisioned it as a tool of statecraft, to bind up wounds after civil strife, or correct a rare miscarriage of justice. It was meant to be legible. You were supposed to look at a pardon and understand exactly why mercy was granted. That tool has been stripped of its original intent and converted into a transactional commodity. It operates as the constitutional dress worn by a protection racket, sending a clear message: loyalty buys safety, in a way obedience to the law never will. You can see the pipeline in the data. Regulatory heat cools, substantial donations flow in, and suddenly men convicted of securities fraud, illegal foreign lobbying, and money laundering are cleared. Steve Bannon walks free, alongside tech founders and corporate executives, providing lifetime cover for an inner circle willing to pay the door fee. While the pardon protects the network, a 2016 Supreme Court ruling protects the core. In McDonnell v. United States, a sitting governor accepted luxury watches, the use of a Ferrari, and massive loans from a businessman wanting state backing. The court ruled this was not bribery, reasoning an official act must be a formal exercise of governmental power, like a vote or signed regulation. This animated scale maps the legal trap. You accept unlimited gifts. The scale weighs toward corruption, but legally refuses to balance until a documented quid pro quo is found. Since nobody commits the arrangement to writing, transactional proximity access remains entirely legal. Then came the recent Supreme Court doctrine on presidential immunity. The court walled off a zone of absolute immunity around official acts. It drew the boundary between official and personal conduct so faintly that almost any executive action can be walked across the line into safety. Ordering a politically motivated investigation is an official act. Firing the investigator is an official act. Look at the math. You bolt McDonnell's incredibly narrow definition of a prosecutable bribe onto the incredibly wide definition of immune executive action. Stacked together, a president's legal exposure for corruption rounds down to 0. The founders understood wealth as physical land. Today, wealth is global, liquid, and largely private. This asymmetry opens a highly efficient extraction engine. Looting a public budget leaves a trail a junior accountant could follow. Taking money from the private sector requires only a handshake and a plausible story. We are looking at an open market in nearness, where proximity to the executive is the most valuable asset available. Investors tied to the UAE put billions into crypto ventures, and export permits for high-end AI chips suddenly become available. Jared Kushner sets up a private equity fund fed heavily by Gulf sovereign wealth, reportedly securing $55 billion in Saudi backing. Then there is the domestic slush fund. The president sued his own government over the alleged leaking of his tax returns. The case settled for exactly $1.776 billion, a number winking at the founding year of the Republic, drawn straight from the United States Treasury. The fund it created is overseen by the president's personal defense lawyer. There are no published standards, no transparency requirements, and no independent audits. Existing audits against the family were reportedly dropped as part of the settlement deal. The money is handed out at their complete discretion. The extraction extends into the public markets. No previous administration generated market-moving events through personal social media at a rhythm that made volatility systematically extractable. Financial operators call it the Trump taco, a sharp reversal that opens a highly profitable window for whoever knew the turn was coming. This chart tracks the pattern. A Friday post threatens tariffs, markets plummet. Over the weekend, the largest crypto liquidation on record occurs, while anonymous wallets open massive short positions. On Sunday, a post walks the threat back. Markets climb, and shorts close for massive profit. By leveraging sovereign wealth funds, opaque private commissions, and anonymous crypto ledgers, the executive can openly monetize the office without leaving a single audit trail. Even with a legal shield and economic extraction engine, a corrupt official must manage public exposure. Historically, a counsel is forced out. That entire chain relies entirely on focus. It assumes an official, even one like Richard Nixon, believes deep down that being exposed is a catastrophe. It requires a working sense of shame to bring the weight of the system down. We are now observing an executive who has proven that embarrassment is a choice you can simply decline to make. The accusation is rebranded a witch hunt. The investigation becomes proof of persecution. Exposure holds zero leverage over a man who refuses to feel shame. To protect this posture, the administration relies on a doctrine Steve Bannon described as flooding the zone. This attack targets the system's scarcest resource, attention. This diagram demonstrates the attack. The linear loop processes one scandal at a time. Generating 50 controversies simultaneously overloads the system. Nodes shut down. No single controversy dominates. The public loses the threat. The press cannot prioritize. Everyone points at everything, meaning pointing at nothing. When the mechanism for establishing facts breaks down, consensus reality fractures. Institutions are breached because the populace can no longer agree on what actually occurred. The experiment runs in real time. A constitutional order designed to leverage shame as a primary constraint is defenseless against an actor refusing to feel it. This is a K-shaped recovery graph. It represents the macroeconomic output of the machine we just deconstructed. The two lines set off from one shared point in the economy and never reconcile. The upper arm measures the reality for the elite. Fences are pulled down, regulations are gutted, and consumer protection bodies are starved. Corporate access is monetized, and share prices and executive valuations go up almost vertically. The lower arm maps the reality for the base. They receive the daily performance of cultural populism, the theater of cuts, and the catharsis of visible enemies. In exchange, they are quietly locked out of the milestones the system used to deliver, facing steep drops in purchasing power and crippling household debt. The immediate consequences are severe, but the long-term reality is worse. Architecture does not dismantle itself when the architect retires. When the current executive leaves the stage, the pardon as merchandise model, the absolute immunity doctrine, and the McDonnell legal shield remain fully intact. The next official to inherit this pre-built, legally immune machine may be far steadier. They may arrive free of the distracting personal oddities, ready to operate the levers with cold discipline and a highly focused ideological aim. That is why waiting for a better election or assuming the institutions will simply and quietly knit themselves back together once the noise stops fails the test of logic. The Republic can only survive through hard structural amendments, redefining bribery, narrowing immunity, and constraining the pardon. Relying on the hope that a future president will simply choose to be a decent person is a gamble rather than a constitutional strategy.